and Always Irish. You'll find me that way, or at JKZND4. Emails, alwaysIrishND@gmail.com. Merch link below. Audio only. Get me anywhere you want it. I should be there. I haven't heard that I'm not anywhere people get their audio only from. Like, sub, share, comment. I don't care what you do. I just like the interaction, okay? So we're going to have a lot to go over today. So let's get into it. Let's go. So first things first, I had my bullet points and how I wanted to shape this episode and everything. And then right when I sat down to hit record, the news came out. I got a whole bunch of text messages. Notre Dame is beating out LSU for Marcus Freeman, Cincinnati's defensive coordinator. I think most people around the country had him as like the number one guy out there and available. I don't know if that's a question. Maybe some other people wanted to go a different direction. But from all that I could tell, this is a home run hire and a great hire by Notre Dame and Brian Kelly. So that's great news. Here's a couple thoughts. Scheme is scheme, and what you're going to do with the scheme and all that kind of stuff. Like, I understand that's a big deal, and there's other people that are more into that aspect of football than I am and are more experts at that than I am. Here's what I like most about Freeman. I like that everybody I've talked to says he's a grinding dog on the recruiting trail. And I'm not trying to be rude, but there's a lot of guys on Kelly's staff or past staffs that don't have that reputation, possibly even including the man himself. So if you could give me a guy that could give me Clark Lee-like results but recruit better, this is a home run. So everybody's told me this guy is a dog on the recruiting trail. Well, listen, if you're a dog on the recruiting trail at Cincinnati, going with Ohio State in your own state and you're Cincinnati and you're a dog in recruiting there, he should have a great time at Notre Dame because he's got way more resources, way more access, way more brand credibility, all that kind of stuff that goes in with the Notre Dame name. So that's what I'm most excited about. I want to see if this guy could get some more athletes on the back end of the defense so we just don't get torched again like we just did the last 2 games. That's what I'm most excited for. So that's a great start. The theme of this episode is transitioning into the final phase of the Brian Kelly era. And a part of what I was going to go over is the defensive coordinator situation. Seems like we got our answer and everybody should be happy. He's young. He played at a big-time program. He's getting big-time results at a smaller football school. It's all trending up. So you got to love the Marcus Freeman hire. Now, here's one thing I've heard. What good does it do to go with this guy and then in a year or two he's gone because he's so good he gets a job just like Clark Lee got a job. I don't think you could live that way. You get the best coaches you can, keep them for as long as you can, try and win in that window, and whatever happens, happens. I totally disagree, and I've heard some Notre Dame people say, oh, what's the point of doing this? In a year or two he goes because he's getting a job or whatever. No, I just don't believe that. You want the best possible coaches available as long as you have them, and you deal with what happens next when it happens. But you can't live that way, scared. Tell me the logic of not hiring a guy. Is it because he's too good? That's what the logic is. If you're telling me, oh, I don't want this guy because he's not going to stick around, you're telling me not to hire him because he's very good at his job then. So I totally disagree with that. You take the guy, do as much as you can, and then you deal with it when he's ready to move on and gets a big-time gig, okay? So this is a really, really strong start to this rebuild transition phase Notre Dame is in right now, okay? So that's the deal with the defensive coordinator situation. It's good news. I am really excited to see what this guy could do on the recruiting trail. That is the number one thing I'm most excited about, okay? So give me those Clark Lee results, similar on the field, but give me a little extra talent, okay, especially on the back end. And that's something else we're going to get into. So that's the deal with that. Now to my regular notes, the program I had scheduled before this news broke. Now that I'm able to calm down a little bit from what happened in the last 2 games, it's time to really start looking at the near-term future of the program, okay? So there's nothing I could do to feel better or not be upset about the way the last 2 games ended. Just the harsh realization that we all had a hope. Maybe this was different. Maybe this team was different. Maybe we really can get over the hump. November 7th's results provided more ammunition for that train of thought. These last 2 games proved you ain't there. Okay? So, as depressing as that is, all we could do now is look at what we could take from those 2 games to help the program moving forward. Okay? Changes are coming, and changes are coming fast for Notre Dame. Between the NFL, graduation, guys transferring, coaches leaving, this team's going to look vastly different next year. This is Brian Kelly's last chance at a reset. Brian Kelly 2.0 was after the 2016 disaster. Now we need Brian Kelly 3.0. What does that mean to me? The foundation of the program is strong, and that was something Brian Kelly spent a lot of years trying to fix. I give him credit for that. Now you have a strong foundation in terms of strength and conditioning, physicality, toughness on the lines, health and nutrition, psychology. They're getting more modern in areas they were behind for a long time. And that's really, really encouraging. So the foundation is very strong at Notre Dame. Now it's time to level up and make one more run with a complete team before Brian Kelly retires or goes and does something else. Okay? The narrative used to be Notre Dame gets in those big-time ball games. The lines were weak. We get pushed around. That was the big knock on Notre Dame. You saw that in 2012, big time against Alabama. Obviously. So that was the knock. It became a priority, and Notre Dame pretty much fixed that. They're pretty damn physical on both sides of the ball. Sometimes not as much as I like, when I need it, when I want it. But generally speaking, that's one area they have beefed up significantly the last few years. That's to be admired. That is a great, great foundation. Now our skill, offensive, and defensive positions need to catch up. Okay, so when I go over what I want to become priorities, they are not in lieu of these other things. That's one thing I want to make perfectly clear as we go through this discussion. The things I'm going to talk about are not going to be to take emphasis away from physical offensive line play and a defensive line that could get to the quarterback or disrupt or whatever. These are not instead of or in lieu of those things. To be a complete team and compete with the 3 teams ahead of you in the playoff, you got to have it all. So I'm not talking about diverting attention or priority away from the foundation that is good. I need you to maintain that, keep building it, and do this other stuff. Well, John, you're asking a lot. That sounds hard. Yeah, it is hard. I'm talking about winning a championship, being the best. It should be hard. Okay? So the goal is to maintain the gains in the areas that were made after the 2016 rebuild, while at the same time doing all you can to create particularly an offense that could actually compete for a title and a secondary that allows you to compete for a title. Okay? Let's be clear. The current offense cannot win a title. It's not going to win a title. It just can't. The philosophy has to change or forget it. It's a new age of college football, okay? I understand we want to be physical and run the ball and all that. Like I just said, I'm not saying to get rid of that. You need that and the ability to throw it all over, in my opinion, if you're Notre Dame. Listen, if Nick Saban himself can transition to a more wide open, throw it all over offense and still win all these titles. Listen, you get what I'm saying? People act like, oh, you're going to change the philosophy of the offense. We can't do that. Nick Saban did it. He was winning titles the old way, like when he played us in 2012. What happened? The times were changing. He changed with it. Now they're winning titles, and they're doing it by throwing the ball all over more. Okay? Or at least having the ability to do so if they want / and or need to. So to me, some of the basic tenets of this offense have to remain, but the overall philosophy, you got to get more aggressive. You could go ahead and beat all the teams you have way more talent than, and we get all excited. You just saw in modern football, when you get to championship time, our offense cannot hang with the 3 best teams. Period. Not up for discussion. It isn't. So I need you to maintain that physicality to be able to run it when you want it or need it. Use those tight ends, use Kyron and all that. And also be able to open it up. It's modern football. Get with it or get lost. That's what it comes down to, okay? You're not winning titles the way we've been playing offense. That should be crystal clear to all Notre Dame fans who have their eyes open, okay? So let's sit back and take a very far away, big picture view of exactly where things sit right now. Major roster turnover, new defensive coordinator, new quarterback, mostly new offensive line. And Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick both probably are going to be gone at or around 2024, okay, as far as I could tell with their deals. Now is the perfect time to re-rack again. 3.0. On Twitter, it was a big meme. Brian Kelly 2.0 after all the changes after the 2016 nightmare. Now you got to do it again. Now it's 3.0, and it is his last run. He's got a few more years to get this figured out to where we could be hitting on all cylinders enough to compete in one of these games. That's where we need to get. That's what's on the line here. Okay? So now's the perfect time to do this. It's natural. The quarterback's leaving. The defense is going to be changed. New offensive line. All these things. Okay? You got the transfer portal activity. There's a lot going on. Okay? So let's look at some of these individual pieces. D coordinator, we already covered it. What I'm most excited about is the recruiting aspect of it, because all this internal stuff I'm going to address, changing your philosophy offensively to be more modern and aggressive, downfield, attacking, all that kind of stuff is great. It comes down to recruiting. If you don't have the dudes, you don't have the dudes. So some people aren't going to like that. It is what it is. You need more skill talent. You need it, and it has to be used and developed correctly, or this isn't getting over the hump. Get used to losing 2 games every year, and then Kelly retires. That's what it will be if we don't get where we need to get. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Okay? So you got the D coordinator situation. That's off to a great start. When I wrote this note, we didn't know who it was going to be. So now we got the number 1 guy. He's a great recruiter. He's young. He's energetic. Connects with the kids. Love it. That's in a good place. Quarterback, okay? Jack Cohn came over from Wisconsin. He ain't the answer to get you to elite, but what he may be is a decent bridge to Buckner, okay? So I think the original hope was, and I was told this, was for Buckner to possibly start as a freshman. He was going to switch high schools to play better competition his final year in California. But that season didn't happen because of COVID-19. So I think that is impeding his development and the idea that he could play right away. So Notre Dame went and got Cohn, who's probably a more developed, reliable option than anybody else we have on the roster if Buckner's not ready next year. Pine, Clark, okay. So it's a little frustrating, but it's circumstances. You can't do anything about COVID. Like, it happened. So if the outcome is Cohn builds you a respectable bridge, Buckner can redshirt, be ready for 22, I guess I can live with that. I can live with that, okay? It's probably the best we could do right now with the situation we're in. Here's the thing, though. Everybody needs to know this. Cone would start next year, theoretically. Buckner would redshirt. 2022 comes. Buckner would be the guy. Welcome to Notre Dame, Mr. Buckner. First game, September 3rd against Ohio State at the Horseshoe. You better be ready. It's game 1 against Ohio State at the Horseshoe in 2022. Okay? Whoever it is better be damn ready. You cannot start that year off losing by 40 to Ohio State. Just shut it down at that point. If that's what happens, which is, as we sit today, that's what it looks like it would be to me. Because if we got killed by Clemson and they got torched by Ohio State, how could I think we could hang with Ohio State? I can't. It's illogical. So you're so far behind both of them in terms of high-level skill in space, talent, and quarterback. It ain't even funny. So that all needs to get fixed, or this whole discussion is irrelevant. Okay? So if that's how it works out, fine. But whoever it is, you better be ready for game 1, 2022 at the Big House. Okay? That's a big one. That's a big one. Okay? So the quarterback position is the most important individual position in sports. You got to have it. You got to have it right. You need an elite guy if you're Notre Dame. Okay? We cover it all the time. Ian Book could probably win a title at Alabama, throwing it and giving it to all those skill talent guys. Even if we recruit those positions better, we're never going to have that. Not to that level. No chance, no way. So that's why it's more imperative for Notre Dame to have an elite level quarterback than all those other schools. No matter what, even if we get better at recruiting these wide receivers and skill guys or whatever, you got to have the quarterback at Notre Dame. You just have to. It's the easiest way to raise the whole thing. You find an elite quarterback, it raises the bar of what's possible for everything. Makes life easier if you have one of those guys. And to be honest, that is probably Brian Van Gorder defensively has been Brian Kelly's biggest mistake defensively. Offensively, he's never had, recruited, developed, made, acquired, inherited, nothing, an elite quarterback. That's what Brian Kelly was known for with Pike and Kalaros at Cincinnati. Quarterback guru. Well, here we are, 11, 12 years. I'm waiting for an elite one to either be there and stay there, be there and develop, or just be recruited and pick Notre Dame and be great and go play right away. Quarterbacks can play as freshmen now. Look around the country. They're doing it at other places. I reject the idea that at Notre Dame, you can't do that. Yeah, you can if the kid's good enough. Okay? So that's Kelly's number one knock at Notre Dame. Never figured out the quarterback position to get an elite one, develop an elite one, not ruin an elite one. Whatever your angle of this is, it all adds up to not good enough. Okay? So that's the quarterback situation. Here's the thing, man. You really got to think about this. The way this is going with Kelly, if his contract expires in 2024 and that's it for him, it's got to be tight. If Buckner flames out, this is just going to all fizzle and be bad or average, right? There's not that many more years for him to luck into a diamond quarterback. So right now, I feel like it's Buckner or this is going to fizzle out and Brian Kelly retires and you actually go backwards instead of get better, right? So that obviously is a huge, important factor, and you better just hope Tyler Buckner's it. And I know some people like Drew Pine. I've had multiple people tell me Drew Pine can't even throw a ball 40 yards in the air. I've had multiple people tell me that. And by the way, when he's out there, he looks like a sixth grader. Small, he just looks like a high school guy out there. So whatever. So to me, it seems like it's got to be Buckner, but I don't know. Whatever, man. So quarterback position obviously is a big one to me. Next, let's look at the transfer portal situation. This is new age college football. Now they changed the NCAA bylaws. Kids can transfer once and not have to sit out a year, play right away. I expect more of this. Every year we go, I expect more and more and more. So a lot of Notre Dame guys have done this the last week and a half. I believe only Griffith was in the 2 deep of all of our guys that went into the portal. Make of that what you will, but it seems like the 4 for 40 Notre Dame experience sell. Some kids just want to play too, right? You don't have starters getting major playing time that are in the portal. So 4 for 40 sounds great to get them there, but it sounds to me like some of these kids want to play and they see the writing on the wall that they're not going to or not going to start or whatever. Okay? So it is what it is, but get used to larger numbers of guys entering the portal from every team, not just Notre Dame, moving forward. This rule where they could transfer once and not sit out is a big damn deal. So you're going to have pieces moving that normally don't. Okay? Which leads me to my next point. Maybe Notre Dame has this. Maybe they don't. If they don't, I suggest they do it. You need a transfer portal coordinator. Maybe they have one. Maybe they don't, but you need one. I need a guy scouring that portal 24/7, fishing for gems. That's going to be a thing now. You need almost your own recruiting guy just to work that portal if this is how it's going to be. So make somebody who knows how to evaluate what they're looking for the portal coordinator, okay? And here's the thing. I really admire Notre Dame getting active with quarterbacks in the portal. I think that's a really, really good move. I understand why they're doing it. It makes perfect sense. Sounds like a good fit, but everybody needs to know. And I think everybody does. This ain't Trevor Lawrence. This isn't Justin Fields. This isn't Burrow. That's not what this is. This is a reliable bridge to the next run. That's what next year is. That's what the Cone situation is. So nobody should expect him to come in there and win a title next year. I don't. This is a really decent bridge into the next, hopefully, run. Okay? So, recruiting elite skill players is the next thing on my list. Obviously, this was the biggest, obvious key difference between us and the other 3 playoff teams. It's an unavoidable fact that everybody needs to acknowledge. Those other 3 rosters have way more elite skill talent than Notre Dame does. That is just a fact. There's no way to spin it. It's a fact. Bring up the 247 recruiting rankings over the last few years. It's a fact. Okay? Understand it. Know what you're up against. Know what you have to do. Okay? Notre Dame will never beat one of those teams while healthy, addressing November 7th. Notre Dame will never beat one of those teams that's in one piece unless they get more electricity out there. That's just a fact. It's not up for debate. You just saw it 2 times in a row. There should be nothing else any Notre Dame fan needs to see other than look at those offenses and what they do. Why doesn't ours look like that? Okay, one of them don't look like the other 3 when you're looking at 4 playoff teams. And it's pretty obvious which one's lagging way behind. Okay? So I need you to recruit a lot more of them. I need you to let them play early. Like a guy like Lorenzo Styles from the 21 class, play day one. Got to play day one, or the 20 class, whatever it is. Lorenzo Styles needs to be out there day one making plays. Next year's the year. It's a transition year, in-between year, reloading year, rebuilding year, new defensive coordinator, new quarterback, all this kind of stuff. Mostly new offensive line. That's the time, is next year. That's the time to let these young guys play and do all that and develop and take their licks next year during this transition window. Okay? So recruiting skill offensive and back-end defensive players is a necessity for Notre Dame to have any chance at all of making one more run before Brian Kelly's done. If that doesn't happen, forget it. Change anything else you want in the program. Players are players. Players are players. We need more really fast, good ones on both sides of the ball, okay? So if you don't get that, you have no chance. So that's what I'm looking for in recruiting, and I'm really open. Freeman can help right away on that back end. Get us more guys that can play back there and aren't going to get burned 24/7, okay, when we play these good teams. So here's the way I look at this. Look at the schedules coming up within this Brian Kelly last window of his contract. Next year's actually relatively soft, in my opinion. That's the year to get the new defensive coordinator in there, iron that out. Get your new philosophical offense going that actually features vertical plays down the field. Okay? So, work on your young players, do all that stuff. Because once you hit 2022 and 2023, you have Clemson and Ohio State both on the schedule both years, plus USC, North Carolina, all the other usual suspects. Okay? So if Brian Kelly has any dream at all of making one more serious run, you either have to get really, really good really fast, or take your 0-4 in those 4 games and then hope 2024 is the year where they're off the schedule. Your guys take the beatings in those games, and then they're ready to actually do something as older guys, Brian Kelly's last year. That's the part I struggle with, you guys. We are not close to a healthy Clemson or Ohio State, and obviously Alabama currently. So you can't go 0-4 in those games, and you just can't. The seasons are dead if you do. The way it sits right now, the way those two programs recruit elite skill talent, and the way we are, with what we just saw in the playoff happen, the way it all transpired, if things don't change, you're going 0-4 in those games. You're going 0-4 in those games. And you just cannot do that. You cannot do that. Think about it. That would be 2 losses already in 2022 from Ohio State and Clemson. Plus, that means you can't lose to anybody else either. You have 3 losses and you're nothing. So, that's what I really struggle with here. We talk about that Brian Kelly window. How much of it is a window? You got those 2 monster programs both 2 years in a row. So it either needs to be you get a lot better a lot quicker than what I think, and you could actually clip one of them off or both of them off. That would be unbelievable. But find a way to maybe split each of those years with 1 win, 1 loss, and then run the tape. You're either going to have to do that or take your 2 losses per year in each of those years, take your licks, and then hope 2024, when the schedule becomes softer and more manageable, that's got to be the year. Win one for Kelly as he retires going out. Like, that would be your scenario, okay? So that's a huge deal to me. When you got to look at that, man. There's only 3 or 4 programs that are better than Notre Dame right now. You got 2 of them on the schedule 2 years in a row. So you better get a lot better really fast. Okay? So this all strings out, leading to Brian Kelly's final swan song, probably 2024. It's just one more big retooling run before he leaves. The harder transition was what he had to do after 16. He had to tear everything down and rebuild it then. Everything. Behind the scenes, people you don't even see had to be fired because that you don't even know their names. They had to redo everything after that disaster. Okay? And by the way, I want to add, that disaster was not a natural disaster. That was a Brian Kelly disaster. That needs to be said. It wasn't just like random bad luck. Bad decisions led to that disaster that led to those changes after 16. Okay? So this transition in some ways is easier and in some ways is harder. You already have a great foundation. You don't need to tear down everything. But you just got to find a way to maintain the stuff you're doing that's good enough and get way better at where you've fallen short. Way better. Okay? The lines are decent, but you need an elite quarterback. You need athletes that could get down the field in space and ball. You need a secondary that can match up with Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson in the next few years. That's what you need, or this is just going to fizzle out. 2 or 3 losses a year, Brian Kelly's gone. He'll leave with the most wins in Notre Dame history by a lot. No postseason game wins that matter, so whatever. That's what it'll be. Very frustrating. Done a lot of good things. It's just, here's the thing. This is Notre Dame. This is Notre Dame. I was thinking about this last night with Brian Kelly. I'm laying there in bed thinking about this. Like, if he had the most wins in school history, almost anywhere else, he'd have a guaranteed statue and everybody would love him forever. Notre Dame's one of the very, very few places where you got to win a title or nobody cares. You got to win a title or nobody cares. I don't care. I don't care. I want titles. I don't care how many games you win against teams you're better than. This is Notre Dame. You got to win a title. These big bowl games, that's what it is. So, in some ways, I feel for Kelly. I wonder if he was at USC or Texas or Florida State or Miami. Would these results be different? Maybe he'd win a championship at one of those places with looser recruiting or more flexibility to do what he wants to do. Okay? At the same time, when he chose Notre Dame, he knew how it was going to be. He knew it was going to be tough to recruit. He knew it was going to be hard to get everybody through classes, right? So almost any other school except for like 5 or 6, Brian Kelly would be a god when he retires. Most wins in school history. But I hate to say it, but in a lot of ways at Notre Dame, it just isn't enough. It's Notre Dame. It's Notre Dame. Titles, big bowl games. That's where it's got to be. That's where this has to get to and end right. End right. Okay? So, how bad does Brian Kelly want a true run? A true run. One where you actually can compete. Not the runs we've had recently where we thought we might be able to and learned we were miles and miles away. I'm talking about a real, genuine run with a team capable of hanging with the 3 programs above us right now. Okay? How bad does Kelly want that before he's done? Is it cruise control, almost to retirement, whatever? Or did what happened in 2012, 2018, and then this year fire Brian Kelly up to where he's going to recruit with his hair on fire the next couple years and figure I could rest on the beach for the rest of time after 2024. But these next few years, I'm getting my ass out there and I'm going to go get the best quarterback available. the best receivers available, something like that, okay? The other question I have is, and I've seen this talked about with some other people that are a lot closer to the program than I am and have more access than I have. A real conversation was had between me and one of these people talking about what does Jack Swarbrick, how does he fit into this final dynamic run? Because he's tied to Brian Kelly. They're tied at the hip. It was his hire, his guy. So does Jack feel an obligation to help get this over the hump? Maybe throw Kelly a bone? Let a kid or two in that maybe, God forbid, they got B's and not straight A's. Oh, you're a horrible kid. You can't come to Notre Dame. I'm just asking. Does Jack feel any pressure to ramp up and actually do something and put a trophy in the case people actually care about? What's in the case now from last year? A tent for the tent city bowl we were in? The camping bowl? What does Jack feel about this? Does he feel an obligation or a final push at all? Or does he sit there and go, this is great. I'm happy with it. That's what I wanted. I want to know what the captain feels about it. Okay? And I know Notre Dame fans never want to sacrifice academia for football wins. I don't either. But I am going to tell you this. I've put together a full-scale plan for Notre Dame to be able to appeal to a new batch of athletes they currently don't or can't while maintaining academic integrity. I have a detailed plan on how Notre Dame needs to do this to get better in recruiting in these areas without lessening academics and ruining the degrees worth for everybody else if a kid who doesn't get a 34 ACT doesn't get in. Okay? I have a full plan that I'm going to go over. Next episode is going to be this full recruiting plan. Okay? I've given it a lot of thought of a lot of angles because I'm just telling you guys, keeping it the way it's going isn't good enough. You just saw that. Status quo is not an option for us if you have goals of doing something before Kelly's gone. That's it, period. You got to get better. Okay? So, overall, recruiting the skill positions, quarterback being primary number one, or making sure Buckner's your guy, whatever. Kelly needs to hitch the wagon to one more quarterback for a run. Looking at the roster, it looks to me like it's got to be Buckner, right? So that's obviously key. The skill positions on both sides of the ball, back into the defense, wide receivers, athletic guys like that. Those are the biggest keys to me right now. In a lot of ways, the foundation's really, really solid, but you got to address these weaknesses or you're going nowhere. You're going to get the exact same results till Kelly leaves. And it's just going to frustrate the hell out of everybody. Okay? So keep doing what you're doing in all these other areas where things are good and you can hang. Level up on these new areas of recruiting focus. Utilize your new defensive coordinator, who's a great recruiter, to help you there. Okay. If these things don't happen, have fun going 9-3 or 10-2 the rest of these years. Then Brian Kelly's gone. And then we have the big discussion. Who's coming in? Is it going to get better, worse, stay the same? All that stuff. Okay. So Notre Dame is in a decent place. Very, very solid program. Top of the very, very good. There's just certain weaknesses that need to be brought up to par to be able to compete. And the window to make it happen for Kelly is very small, and the schedules through it are very tough. It's a tricky situation to navigate, but I'd love nothing more than for Brian Kelly to go out with a win or two that we haven't seen yet. I want that for him. He's done a lot of good things for Notre Dame. I want to feel good about that as he leaves. Okay? So find a way to get these things done and make a final run. Good night.